everybody, and welcome to April's episode of Stars and Cards for the Homeward Healer. We are recording a few days before the beginning of April, so we're actually amidst a pretty wonky part of March. We are, a few days before the solar eclipse in Aries and before Venus and Mercury re-enter Pisces in their retrograde form. So you
Mhm.
know, we got some things to say today. We got, at least I do. So, hello everyone. Welcome. Jenny, how you
Hello,
doing?
everyone. Hello, everyone. I know. It's been a wild, hasn't it? Our house has been hit by every bug and everything you can imagine. We've had tonsillitis, COVID. Apparently, there's two types of cold, strep, like everything that could go through. We've just been like, bam, bam, bam. So it feels like literally walking over the coals in a wee bit, we've been not a good way. Just that way energetically, it's been one of those things. And it's so funny. Just things like what you talked about miscommunications and missing each other
Hmm.
with like interpersonal relationships where people are just missing each other or things falling through and then things coming back and then you and I have chatted about that, but it's just
Yeah.
what a time to be alive.
Oh my.
And then there's just the whole
Oh
shit
yeah.
show that's going on with us as well.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's amazing to do this podcast, together, come back, regroup after we talked about the energies like a month prior and just see what like transpired and the accuracy of some of the things we've talked about unfolding in their own little unique way during, those weeks that have unfolded. And I think to myself, I did mention that we were going to have a lot of viruses and sickness, and I was saying, everyone be careful, that sort of Neptune and
Yeah.
Pisces in that anaretic degree, and some of the aspects it was making, I was like, we could be more susceptible. And the rise in
Yeah.
different viruses, measles, whatever have you, that's going on out there, and the misinformation, the disinformation, and everything that's going on, like all this, like, oh boy.
Were you just directly talking to me, Shadi? And I don't know. I think like sometimes
I
I'm
mean,
so energetically sensitive that you say stuff or later on, I'm like, that's exactly what happened to me, word for word for word.
I do have to say, I think that those of us that are, we were making this podcast for people that are similar to
Yes.
us. So obviously, I
Yeah.
think we're speaking to our own little coven, our own people. So it feels like we're all highly sensitive. We pick up on the collective energies, and sometimes it's hard to tell what's ours, what's collective, what's
Mhm.
karmic, what's like, and let me
Yeah.
tell you something wild I'm going to share with folks out there because I'm like so sensitive about this. It's not even a big deal, but so I have this sty that happened a couple days before that lunar eclipse a couple weeks ago, and it kind of like it was at its worst. And I woke up in the middle of the night, I kid you not, when that eclipse was exacting at like 3, it was like occurring 3 a.m. here in Toronto, and I was like, my eye was hurting, and I was like, oh, is there something I need to see that I don't want to see? Like I was literally like, oh, like memo received. They styes tend to represent like a blockage literally in our
Oh,
vision.
that makes so much sense. Yeah.
So I didn't want to go too deep with it at that time. I was like just more obsessed about like, well, how the hell am I going to do with this thing that's hurting? And all that to say, I went back in time to the last time I had a really bad sty, and it was 2020 November eclipse season again.
Wow.
So I was like, okay, this is interesting. I'm not going to panic about like getting a sty every time there's a eclipse because they happen every year. But
Yeah.
what I'm saying is like, there's something significant for us highly sensitives that like, I feel collectively, I feel uneasy, right? And oftentimes when I feel uneasy in my body, this happened before COVID, it's not a personal, it's not like an omen for personal things. It's often like a collective, I'm tapping into a collective unfolding and I can't quite know what is happening. And this isn't to like, I'm not trying to scare anybody. I'm just saying that I like the times are not good. Okay. Like the times are not good.
Yeah.
There's good
We can be
moments.
open and honest about that. We have to be. Yeah.
I mean, like
100%.
and we could talk. You and I always talk about how to find the good in these moments,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of us that do this work that try to do that, but we can't. We cannot avoid that things are collapsing, things are changing, and it's so painful, and so anyway, I just want to share that with folks because I'm like, this is, the longest lasting sty, and it's angry, it's so,
Mm.
there's a lot of things in this for me that I'm
Mhm.
like, okay, like I need to pay attention. Our bodies tell us so much. And it's like we get messages all the time, but we don't
All
always
the time.
listen, right? Until the body's
Yeah.
like, hello.
It is fascinating that these things are also happening in a hermit year. This does feel like a time period where we are being asked to step up a little bit more in our self belief around our sensitivities, our intuitions, our healing properties, skill set. And I think that that makes sense that this is like a hermit year, and these things are very intensely asking us to pay attention almost. Do you know what I mean? Or asking us to sort of step into roles that previously we felt we had to hide, or we were a little bit like we would ignore or we would push down because they weren't accepted by the overculture 100%. But it's almost like we have no choice now, is what it feels like. And yeah, and I think a lot of us also feel that we don't want to be acceptable to the overculture
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
The
Well,
hermit has that. The hermit's on their own path. They walk their own path, their own steps. They're a light in the dark. They're on their pilgrimages. They're on their discovery journeys. So yeah.
totally. I think the Hermit year makes so much sense in relation to this Neptune entering Aries. So April really begins with the first time we have ever experienced Neptune's energy in Aries. And
Mm.
I think that is really aligned because it is that spiritual warrior energy of like um, showing up for yourself as well as like first for yourself, so the confidence, that calling. And as healers or as intuitives, is like, you're right, we can't have one foot in like the self-doubt and one foot in like, do I do this, do I not do this, what do I do? It's like, now's the time, wake up,
Yeah.
go
Yeah. Like
go in.
physically, like you're saying, you're noticing it in your physical body. And, people can believe or what they want to believe or not, but we all have little alarm bells, our own personal alarm bells that go off physically in our bodies or on our bodies. Or I tend to get things very like chest
uh,
type
mm,
things. And the fact that I got COVID, even though I had my vaccination this year,
yeah, yeah,
winter back, and I did all the things you're supposed to do and
yeah,
all that kind of stuff. It was very like in my chest, breath, like which creates anxiety. And that's where my anxiety sits anyways. I sit with that. And so, yeah, I can feel that that is something, to pay attention to. Or like I had great plans for March, right? And you kind of were like, yeah, yeah, I mean, it's not like a normal marches, so just
man.
just see. And then I'm like, yeah, it's gonna be great. I'm gonna do this, 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 this. And then I was like floored. And it's like just a reminder that like what really matters, like what really
Yeah,
matters. And
yeah.
life is unpredictable, and we're gonna have to deal with these unpredictabilities and also take care of ourselves and show up for ourselves as much best as we can. So
No, it's no, absolutely. I think that is all we can do. And, as
mhm.
someone who I mean, you're Canadian, you live abroad, you live in Scotland, I mean, you've been living there forever, in Scotland. So,
Half and half, I feel now.
but you can relate to the level of stress a lot of us have
Oh
here
yeah.
because it's like I said, on my bingo card for 2025 wasn't a war with, the United
Yeah.
States. I just
Yeah.
really, it was unexpected.
Yeah.
So it really, really has rattled like the collective energy here as well in Canada. And then like um and so it's this thing where it's like economic fears and like, that's that sort of Uranus in Taurus on its like last leg, right? As it's about to go
Yeah.
into Gemini this summer. And it's like, it's like the final hurrah. It's like, let me just throw in as much economic instability in the world as I
It's
can before I let you
yeah.
guys know you're attached to really stupid systems that are really
Yes.
harmful, that are not
Yeah.
in your greater good as humanity. There's Uranus wanting us to liberate and, you know, like connect with our higher iteration of ourselves as humanity. And in the sign of Taurus, a little conservative, a little bit like, connected to all the things that it owns and it has tangibly. And it's like, I'm going to take all of that and just shake it. And we're talking about land, like literal physical land. So
Resources.
speaking
Hmm.
of, lands that are occupied and being bombed and harmed, or lands that are being talked about as being taken over. And so there's all of this instability with this, final movement of this planet. I mean, as we're zooming out to look at things, it's sort of uncanny because you're like, oh my gosh, wow,
Hmm.
are we going to get this memo before it enters Gemini this summer and offers us a whole different iteration? But it's just been so unstable since 2018 in terms of like everywhere in the world. And I know that the global south has always experienced
Yeah.
instability. Like we know how imperialism works, we know how colonization works and everything. But it's like there's this is now ripple effect into the all of us. Like nobody is
Yeah.
feeling shaky grounds is really
Yeah.
what it feels like. And so yeah, I mean, this is where we kind of move into talking about April, is that it's the
Hmm.
liminal month for me where we're going from what was to what will be, or
Hmm.
what may be. It depends on how you view it.
Hmm.
Do you feel like there's like a destined path, what will be, or is there, are we working with multiple paths and what are we going to choose? But there is this is what's happening this month, because by the middle of the month we have that full moon in Libra, and that's the 12th, and Mercury has already gone direct on the 7th, and on the 12th Venus stations direct, and we enter like forward moving, right? We have, then the retrogrades of those big planets are over. They're moving into a forward motion and they start to go into Aries. Mars goes from Cancer, where it's been like, into like, into Leo, into a fire sign. So lots of fire energy actually, as the sun enters Taurus on the 19th with that really.
Hmm.
So it's like, it's almost as if the sun is tethering, is it the tether this second half of April, whereas the other energies are like go. So we're sort of going forward, but thankfully being held by Taurus's energy, and that new moon in Taurus on the 27th holds us. And then we have, Mercury, Mars, Venus, all in fire signs going, all right, remember all that stagnation? We're ready to go forward. What do you want?
Yeah.
Let's go.
That's so cool because, going from Pisces to Aries, Pisces, a lot of the majority of the tarot energies with Pisces is water. We're moving into Aries that has water, as fire, but mixed with water, which is we'll talk about, you talk about that liminal space, like absolutely, yes, weird magic moments of like alchemy between fire and water that shouldn't exist together, but can. So there's an opportunity there. And then we go into predominantly earth energies with Taurus. And so this makes sense that we're doing this sort of water to fire to then grounding earth energies, possibly, hopefully, and for Taurus with the Hierophant and stuff, and like the Empress and stuff, really could potentially beautiful. But again, we can talk about all these things in terms of being aligned energy, unaligned energy. So
I wonder if you could speak more about this, because for me it feels like Pisces, Aries, from an
yeah,
astrological perspective, is like the closing of a cycle. Pisces ends things and Aries begins it. So it feels like we're not quite done with something in April. We're still not quite done thinking about things like, even in terms of our relationships, when you think about Venus, well, when you think about how we're communicating ourselves and our needs and our desires and our how our values are aligning with the way uh we think about all the things that matter to us. I feel like in Pisces, we're getting so much of that, not rumination, but we're like thinking about it still for this first half of April. And
yeah.
then it's like, how do we transmute a lot of that wisdom, or without kind of like drowning in some of the realities of like, things like, do I leave this relationship? Do I quit my job? Do I, as I mentioned before, like, do I change my perspective on something, or do I actually need to change that thing? And I feel like
Hmm.
the month where some of that clarity comes in. But how does
Yeah,
that really happen with water and fire, really? Because
yeah.
other, it's like, pff, supposed to put each other out, right? Water puts out fire.
Yeah, normally exactly, or what, or it could create steam. Too much fire with a little bit of water, steam. You get that. So it is a weird murky, like a murky, but and Pisces is murky even in itself with the moon and the hanged being in that sort of mysterious, like suspended weird vibe. Where we were talking about that in last month
Mm,
with
mhm, mhm.
Pisces about staying with yourself in really uncertain times and having like being open to like where you're being drawn, where you're being directed, and being open to the treasure that's in there and not just being like panic stations through this uncertain. Because a lot of us really are finding, uncertainty really a an uncomfortable, a disconcerting
Comfortable.
sort of period. Yeah. There you go, words. And it's tricky. So what tip in a typical year when you would then move to Aries, there's a bit of that sigh of relief. Like, usually typically when we celebrate the equinox and stuff, there's like we celebrate the new year and it's sort of that fresh start, that feeling of like, okay, but there is, like you said, this drag. It's this drag on it, and it's just elongating this
Yeah.
weird time
Yeah.
period. Because Aries has, so I think what you can do is we need to really be mindful of tempering things a lot, whether it's our emotions, what to do with the water stuff, or and how we relate to our energetic needs and our energies at this time. And the Emperor is a great, I mean, it's a great energy to work with,
Mm,
but taking up your space, recognizing that you taking up your space doesn't take away from anyone else taking up their space.
mhm.
An aligned Emperor is wonderful for working with things like self-doubt and your sense of how you take up space in your own life, like how much of your own life is for you. But it does have links because it's ruled by Mars, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
It
Aries
is.
and Mars. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
With the tower, and the tower is another tricky one. It also numerologically has a link to the death card, and so there's a lot of this. Like that's why typically you'd be like, yeah, fresh starts, like
Yeah.
systems that no longer work for us, like clearing things that aren't aligned for us anymore, because you have the Queen of Wands and King of Cups as well as your sort of energetic siblings for this season, and those two are really cool.
Yeah.
But because I've got this elongated Pisces energy, it's just feeling a lot more like icky, sticky,
Yeah.
slow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is.
And I wonder how much of the, so maybe then
Mm,
tamping into that emperor
mm.
energy could be really powerful for us in this month because that's the one it wants to be in.
Yes.
And that sort of connecting to ourselves and our energetic capacities. And I think a lot of us are going to be asked to really consider what energetic capacity we have for things and how we take care of our energy levels and
Mm-hmm.
how we feed back into how do we tend to that little flame, our called a hearth flame. Um, I always think of it like in that part of our body, sort of the solar plexus part, where there's a little fire burning and it's either can rage or it can snuff out. And we have to make sure that we take really good care of it. And I wonder if those are the practices
Yeah.
connecting to the emperor that could be really helpful
I
in
love
this time.
that. I really love that so much. In a world where we have so many fucked up emperors, like, and rise of unaligned emperors everywhere.
Yes.
And also the sneaky emperor that's
Mm.
like masquerading as like the savior. And it's such a important thing that you say about us, like tapping into our own emperor energy, because
Mm.
I do think a lot of these retrogrades, since really December, we've been kind of thrust into this space of like reconsidering our own relationship to our confidence. Aries really does, it is about that like me and ego self, right? And we do
Yeah.
have to tend to the self and the ego, as much as Pisces is not. Um,
Yeah.
but we go through the zodiac cycle to learn and become better versions of ourselves, or, more aligned versions of ourselves, in order to then become a more aligned sort of leader in our life. And we have to do the healing, right? Pisces brings it all
Yes.
together, of all the wisdom of the, there you go,
Yeah.
of cups.
Yeah. The embodied healing leadership card. Yeah.
embodied healing, exactly. So I feel like I love what you said, and this like King of Cups. It really does feel that, it's just the thing that sits here for me is like, we're so tired.
So tough.
It's a lot. We're so tired. People ask me all the time, when do things like get easy? And I have to be honest with folks, like I think easy's done. Like I think the illusion of easy is done. And also we're not in
Agreed.
an easy era. We're not in an easy time in the world, right? It was these things were bound to come to a head, right? Similar to my sty, not to be gross, but like literally
Ah,
the block has to get released. Like there was no way all these awful things were going to like foundationally like not crack at some point and
mhm,
for things to collapse. So here we are. And also, I think that's the calling. That's the calling for some of us to come through, whether it is through this type of work or who we are to our families and our communities and our friends or in our jobs. People are feeling their own things that are happening, and there's everyone
mhm,
is trying to do the human thing, like of like just making it through right now in this really chaotic time. There's no way to get this right or do this perfectly, or this is it. We cultivate the ease in our day to day. Like you and I talk about this all the time. Like how much self-compassion we're gonna like hold for ourselves if, for example, this March was like a terrible revenue month for somebody, right? Or like things are just as you said, 2 weeks of being sick or the entire month of being sick. Well, like you have to just pause. You have to pause. And then it's like, do you get mad at yourself or do you
mhm,
get, and I think Pisces is holding us to this. Like it's holding us here going,
mhm.
are you going to get this memo? Because where's the self-compassion? Where is
Yeah.
where is this? Where's the healing? Where's the self-compassion? I'm not quite done with you,
Yes.
you know?
Yeah.
We're gonna
Yeah.
go back. Like I think there's a real reason why these retrogrades were in Aries and came back into Pisces during
I
Aries
agree.
season.
Yeah.
Like you're not
Yes.
going forward like this. You are not
Not
going
again.
forward like this.
Yeah.
Not this year. Not this huge year where there's so much transition happening energetically. You're not going to go forward without getting this memo. You know. So yeah.
That makes so much sense. And I think that, like, we talked a lot about our spiritual practices as being what are our spiritual practices that are contributing to our energetic hygiene. And I think that this could be an excellent time to continue to visit those. And especially if you haven't had a chance or just didn't, visit those in the last and Pisces season the last month, maybe that's something you could take forward here. Because remember, yes, we talk about aligned and unaligned. And, I think predominantly too, if we're talking about a lot of women and, um, working with Emperor energy can be very healing. I think it can be very empowering for us sensitives to look at that space taking, a person who takes up that space is somebody who knows their energetic needs and tends to them and care, as a caretaker of that. The King of Cups is one of the best ones, in the deck for that support because they are like embodied leadership of the work that happens from the Queen of Cups because the
Mm,
Queen of Cups, Queens and Kings go together. But energetically, because this is fire and water, water and fire and fire and water, they're the energetic siblings, I say, for this energy. That's predominantly she's the one, or they are the one that is predominantly with this season, but the two, when you're talking, I was just like, that's King Cups, King Cups, King Cups. So these two are just wildly interesting. She's the witch in the deck, by the way.
yeah.
So again, we're going back to these spiritual practices. It's like literally, what are we doing to
Yeah.
make sure that our spirit is feeling and our souls are feeling safe and cleansed and topped up, and
Yeah.
how does that going to feed into the energetic capacities that we have, and how tender are these things and how well do we take care of them,
Sure.
especially in times when it's really really challenging. And when we go into Taurus, that's the Hierophant, which is unaligned, is another unaligned energy, would be like fake wellness gurus, leaders, like bad leaders, so we've got a couple months of this sort of unaligned, dealing with these big characters who are like false prophets and things like that.
Mhm.
So very interesting and but aligned, beautiful energies.
No, I
So
mean, I think
yeah,
that um I think that the false prophets and phony healers, like, I've said so much that this will be the year of exposing. They're going to be exposed. People are going to see people, like, they're going to feel who is
yeah,
real and who is not. I think it's not even like necessarily someone being exposed, but people just going, really not connecting
it's
with
something
this
not
person
right.
saying
Yeah,
anything. Like,
yeah.
you just sound like you're not really saying a whole lot. And so I think the energy will
I should
shift.
just say word salad. No more word salad. I
Yeah.
was like, that's
Yeah.
it. You just say a bunch of words. I don't get
Like
it. Like, what is it? Yeah, uh-huh. Totally.
100%. And we're
Mhm.
just like, yeah, exactly, like meaningless, like words that have no meaning and or that have been twisted. A lot of manipulative energies that are going to also surface as well over the next, bunch of months. But I do think that um this month, by the midway point, maybe closer to the end, really, like we're going to start to feel more grounded in that Taurian kind of energy, even though Uranus is still there, kind of rocking the boat a bit. But, I think learning to dance with the uncertainties is going to have to become like a skill. And a great emperor knows that, understands that it's about dancing with the changes. Because the more rigid, the more
Yeah, dictatorship.
forcing, yeah,
Yeah,
forcing
whether
and
we're a dictator to ourselves or dictator to others, like it's not.
exactly,
And most of us, it'll be to ourselves. Like I know we're talking, a lot of people that are listening here, it's how we treat ourselves typically, how that
exactly,
spills over into our life. But we're often worse to ourselves than we are to anybody. I mean, we
yeah,
are typically worse,
typically.
more to ourselves. We can be, and not compared to other how we treat other people. But
Yeah, it's
yeah,
very true. And I think the reason is that, the last few months, because they haven't also yielded the types of results people have wanted to see, it's easy
mhm,
to also feel like a failure. Like imagine that emperor that feels like they just failed. And now,
yeah,
how is that going to spill over into their confidence or into how they're going to make certain decisions moving forward? So we really want to think about, again, leaning into the King of Cups, as you said,
mhm,
in terms of like the emotional maturity, the emotional um, maturity, really like helping us understand that there are ebbs and flows in life. As Pisces again saying like this is really out of your control sometimes. Like, the emperor doesn't always have control. I guess that the whole point of focus for me is that, as you mentioned, is that emperor that has self compassion and has the emotional maturity and honesty with themselves will thrive, will find
oh
a way
yeah,
to pivot or move with things as
mhm,
opposed and as opposed to trying to rigidly hold on to something that is not working. um
mhm,
and the times right now are constantly throwing things our way, like, oh, you thought this was gonna, okay, so what are you gonna do now? And the
mhm,
idea is, before I'm gonna just have a check-in. I'm gonna have a check-in with myself, like, where the fuck am I at? I
mhm,
think that full moon in Libra this April it's not
mhm,
an easy one. It does make a square to Mars, and Mars in Cancer before it enters Leo. It's still it's gonna be tender around like how to balance our feelings, how to balance all of this, as you said, all this grief, all of this
yeah,
big emotions. Like as I'm literally scrolling through my social media,
mhm,
watching the annihilation of children and families in Palestine and Gaza, and also like you know at the horrors in Sudan, horrors in
mhm,
Congo, let's you name it, and in our own backyard with some of the things that are happening. So it's like there's a lot some of us do not ignore and
yeah,
are witnessing, and also like the balance there where the grief can swallow you up whole if it's not like
yeah,
processed, not
yeah. And
mm,
that's unhealthy, and that's
not
yeah,
healthy.
that's not healthy either. Like it's also when we abandon ourselves in the name of caring for other people or caring about what's happening in the world, it serves nobody. It literally doesn't serve you, certainly doesn't. It doesn't serve those people that these things are happening to. like we do have to stay very embodied. And I think the emperor is a great reminder of that. And so are the kings. Kings and emperors are the like embodiment of the work that we do, and like the so I always put them together. Empress, emperor go together. Empress is the internal work for the emperor to show up, and then all the queens are the internal work for all the kings to show up, in my way of
Yeah.
seeing things. So that's the embodiment, outward embodiment of the skills and tools that you do with the queens,
Yeah,
internally, and your root systems, right? They're all the root systems. And
absolutely.
I think that, yeah, and I think that we have to really cling on to that if we're going to live aligned Emperor energy in Aries season,
Yeah.
is to bring in those emotions like the King of Cups, like the Queen of Wands, like, these energies that want us to be much more emotionally intelligent. I loved when you said that. I was like, that's the King of Cups. It is. It's actually probably more the Queen, but it's that
Okay, yeah.
intelligent, but they go together hand in hand
Yeah.
to me. But I was like,
Yeah.
yes, that's embodied, somebody who embodies emotional intelligence. And that means knowing that they are worthy of taking up space in their own lives. They're worthy of healthy,
Yeah.
healing, spiritual wellness practices that are,
Yeah.
that are supportive for them and wherever they're at, that we're worthy of space and time and ease as much as we can access it, that
Totally.
we're worthy of like showing up in our lives.
It's important to think about like um the truth of our like emotions. So like the emotional honesty really is the start of getting to the emotional intelligence. To say I'm scared or I'm sad, oh yeah, I'm devastated, like it's a hard thing to do because people don't even have it for each other. Because remember, the minute you tell somebody you're scared, oh, don't be scared,
Yeah.
you know.
It
So
doesn't do anything for the feeling in my body.
no, it doesn't. We don't even know how to do it for ourselves, let alone hold space
Yeah.
for each other. So the reality is it's so simple. It's so simple to even say, I'm going to commit to a new way this year by literally being very honest about how I'm feeling to
Yeah.
myself
Yeah.
and about everything that's happening. But the other thing I want to say too is that as a neurodivergent person
Mhm.
who now has an understanding of some of my ways, is that some of us tend to hyperfixate on things, right? So I do hyper tend to hyperfixate on social justice and politics, and
Yep.
yeah, and I want to say there's nothing wrong with that.
Activities, everything, hyperfixation. Yeah.
Because it's like all my life it was like, why can't I just find the balance? Just like when we talk about that,
Yeah.
full moon in Libra, it's like, how do you find the balance? I can't lean into, and I always felt so bad, ashamed that this is how I am. And I'm thinking to myself now, my own learning that I want to share with folks, and just what I had revelations over this last month is that it's okay. However, in addition to that, in what ways can you do something with that energy instead of necessarily talking about it or hyperfixating? Is there art you can make with that? Or is there, a letter you can write, or a petition you can start? Or how, and this is the thing again with this month, is like how, and maybe there's the alchemy you were talking about, water to fire, but it's like, how do I find a way to transmute some of that emotional rumination or that huge ocean of feelings and hyperfixation, the huge ocean of feelings that comes from the hyperfixation is what I'm trying to say. um
Yeah.
and then that sort of brain hyper, it's like, oh, it feels so intense, I'm gonna just go into my logic place now. and
Mhm.
and instead bringing it back to the body, if one doesn't want to like uh necessarily feel it, but how about we pull out of there and try to do like channel it towards creating something, and that's
Yeah. Yeah.
something different with it instead of just like doom
Oh, I
scrolling
love that.
or like commenting or talking to people about it all the time. People who don't want to hear it, for example, like people in my life who are literally like, we are at, a Nowruz lunch. Can we please not talk about
Yeah.
this? And I'm like, okay, what are we going to talk about?
But what are we
What are
going
we
to
going to
talk
talk about?
about?
And so, without judging myself for not, like taking a breather from that, but saying, okay, if I can't always talk about it, how am I going to now channel this important thing and make something from it? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. To feel like to like honor that part of you. The ways and means to do that. And I think if we can pour that into our work, because we do anyways, as
yeah,
much as we can, and it's how do we pour in, how do we know that we're doing enough of that and maybe pouring into our something creative like you with your poetry.
And here's the thing, how to get out of that hyperfixation can offer us so much possibility, not just with that thing, but with other things, you know? Like if one knows that they have a tendency to sort of, sit there and scroll because this is kind of available to us now. It wasn't before. Before I did go write. I did write short stories. I did write poetry because there wasn't a device in my hand that I was scrolling with. And again, that's what you were saying about April. It's like, what is the thing that I want to commit to kind of, you know, be different with things a little bit. Like what needs to go? Maybe my phone needs to, you know,
Yeah.
uh,
Oh, timeouts massively.
yeah, I mean, I'm gonna show folks this. I have this thing where it's like a lockbox.
Oh my gosh,
Phone
amazing.
goes in here. You have to like break it in order to get your phone. And I think there's moments of like revelation and creativity that are
Yeah.
possible in terms of doing, and I think that's going to be that Libra full moon this month where it's like the balance isn't in like happy to like,
Yeah.
negate the despair. It's not
Yeah.
like that. It's more like,
Yeah. No toxic positivity.
no, we're not saying
We don't
like,
have time for that
yeah,
shit.
go out and like I just
Yeah.
that's not gonna be real for some of us. Like we're not gonna energetically even relate to that. I've never
No.
understood that whole thing. But I think
Yeah.
we see it as more like creativity is sort of the antidote, not antidote, but it's the balance to um that sense of despair or sense of like being stuck or down or depressed
Yeah.
or whatever have you, or anxious. Then maybe how are we making time and space for that Libra?
And so we're going to hold it either way. Like for those of us who do hold, like who are highly sensitive, empathic, all those wonderful things, we hold it regardless. So like, can we do something with it to help move it out into the world? And that's maybe what's tapping into that care for our energetic hygiene and stuff because we're holding it and it's taking up energy, it's taking up,
Yeah.
mind, bodies, all of it. Like it's taking up space. And maybe is there a way we can get it to move a little bit through a
Exactly.
creative process, whether that's singing, dancing,
Yeah,
writing,
writing,
art, painting,
art,
any whatever. Mhm.
anywhere. And I'm willing to bet the majority of people listening to this are the same. Like you're intuitively inclined, you're likely artistically and creatively inclined.
Got something
You're
going on.
neurodiverse, you're
You're doing
likely,
stuff.
yeah, I
And
mean,
tell us what it is because we want to know.
when you
There was an amazing post that went around. Did you see that? It's probably on TikTok, but it ended up being on Instagram about whimsy. And people were asking, what do you do? Like there was a whole thread about what people do to create more whimsy in their life. And it
okay,
was just like it was the most beautiful, amazing like thing. And then the comments were amazing. Like people would wash dishes to candlelight and put like chamber music on so they could pretend that they were like, back in medieval times or like and the way they speak to their pets and how they address their pets and things like it. Just someone listens to French like cafe music when they're shopping so they can pretend they're in a French film.
oh
It's like
my
it's like
gosh, that's
I'm just
so
like
cute.
people are so. That's what I mean about how can we bring more like creativity, like whimsy, just in our day to day lives for no other reason other than to be creative and to like
Yeah,
create more beautiful moments and magic in our everyday mundane lives. Do you know what I mean? Like,
whimsy's
I
a good
know
word, by the way. That's a good word.
whimsy is one of my favorite words in the whole of the
Whimsical.
English language. Whimsical, whimsy,
I
I
do
love
think
it.
of Pisces as whimsical. I'm just like, yeah, a
Okay.
little bit. I don't know. I'm like,
But that makes sense because that whole thing just blew
right?
up
That's
last
so
month.
funny.
Yeah.
Right. Well, here's the thing, whimsy as the counter to despair. And like we're gonna try to hold that both with this the full moon in Libra on the 12th of April. And may we tether into that sort of Taurus energy, as we kind of like start taking action. And I think start taking action
Yeah.
around maybe the things that we can take action around in our lives. Like in Canada, we have an election coming up.
There's something.
So that's something that to take action on. But definitely, I hope that everyone um, finds their fire to rekindle as well by
Yeah.
mid-April. Because it's been a long, stagnating. I would say 6 months. It's felt like a long, felt like a decade the last 6 months, and so
It has, yes. As we know, like January was the epitome of that feeling. January went on for like, I don't know, 835 days. And then, you know what I mean? So that is that kind of that, yes, that slow, stagnant, clashy,
Yeah.
It's very of the fives of the deck. It's very like hanged being the fives. It's that like sticky. We know we need to go through it. There's lessons in it.
But
We don't want to do it, but we have to do it. And it's just that, yeah. And the Hierophant is the five actually in the deck. So there'll be lessons from that, I'm sure, next month. We talk more about Taurus stuff. But
yeah,
yeah.
I'm looking forward to that. And yeah, I mean, yeah, we'll see. I just my new this is my new line now. We'll see. I just it's
We'll
so
see.
it's literally all I say now to people. It comes out like without me. It's like see. And the other day someone's like, "Man, you really say that a lot." I was like, "I don't even know where that's coming from," but ironically, as I, need to see some things clearer in my own personal life. Anyways, thank you so much, everyone, for
Thank
listening
you.
in. And please, as always, leave a comment if you have any questions. And, Jenny and I have our own spaces on our websites where we share more about the energies in a more sort of in-depth or in our own way that we try to chat here more, just have a convo on our podcast and see where the flow takes us. So if you want some more specifics on how to navigate the month,
Mhm.
you can always book readings with both of us, tarot for Jenny and astrology readings for me. So um
Mm.
yeah, we're in for some
Be
change.
whimsical.
Yeah,
Do an audit. Do a spiritual wellness audit. Go be whimsical and take care of yourself.
absolutely. Okay, bye everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.